One of the core themes of Desperate Housewives is how far would you go for the people you love? A lot of people are surprised by the Tom Scavo hate, but I am not because I am one of its ringleaders. When I first watched the show when I was like 12, I thought that he was a great husband, blah, blah, blah. And then when I rewatched it, I was like, wait, this guy sucks, right? One of the main issues in the Scavo's marriage is that because they weren't being tested by a lot of the other problems that the other marriages were on the show, they were dealing with a lot of internal conflict that was spurred on by Tom Scavo's inability to like decide what he wanted to do, right? He was perpetually trapped in the state of arrested development. He was like a man child, and nobody could ever like figure out what he wanted because he didn't know what he wanted, right? In season one, he was working full time in advertising. Lynette was staying at home with their three kids. She fucking hated it, right? Her whole plot line was, I hate my life. And then in season two, they switch. She goes back to work. He resents her for spending all her time at work and having like an emotional affair. And then he's like, well, we need to figure something out. That's on top of him convincing her to move to the suburbs, him convincing her to give up her job the first time, and him getting her pregnant three times when she said she only wanted one kid, right? Everything that the Scavos have done has been what Tom wanted. And when Lynette went back to work, she was like, this is the first time that I'm in control of my own destiny. Again, bringing in those issues of feminism from the 80s and the 90s, where these women were in their 40s in 2004, right? So they're from a different generation. And even though Lynette was like a career woman, at the end of the day, she still sort of followed this expected path of her gender. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is what society said. Society was like, well, you're a wife and mom, so you have to be a wife and mom. And that was the tension of the character, where we saw her as a stay-at-home mom with four kids, and she was like, I fucking hate these kids. These kids are so bad. I hate my life. I want to go back to work. I need to get out of this house. The Scavos then changed their entire lives again when Tom decided that he wanted to open a pizza place. And then a couple of seasons later, they were like, actually, I don't want to do a pizza place anymore. I want to do something else. And that's when Lynette was like, you need to get your fucking life together because I can't keep changing everything on a whim, right? Every single time you have an idea, you have to like toss our lives into disarray. We have five kids. We can't just like do whatever you want anymore. That's on top of him being like a little bit controlling, a little bit sleazy, a little bit annoying, right? So like your mileage may vary. You can like see this marriage and be like, he's the best guy in the world, he's a king. But for a lot of people, they don't want to give up their autonomy and their control and their life and the decisions over what they're doing with their life to a man who can't figure out if he wants to be a businessman or a pizza owner or what kind of car he wants to drive or if he wants to be married or not. In season two, we meet the Applewhites, who are one of the few Black characters on the show, and this plotline was kind of a mess and very racialized and very weird for a lot of reasons, right? So ableist, right? Because Caleb on the left is like kept locked in the basement. I think because it was 2005, it was a very different time, but like this never would have happened now where a Black man is like chained to a wall in a basement. Like even saying that makes me want to fucking scream. But Betty believed that her son was a murderer, so she like locked him up. She didn't want to give him to the police because he was a Black man, right? And it turned out that like Matthew was the one on the right. Matthew was the one who was committing all of these crimes and then blaming them on his brother. And then like the whole, again, ableist plot of like putting him down because he didn't want him to suffer. All of this stuff is so problematic, but all of it is like, again, tying into this core theme of like, we need to protect our family. I need to protect my son. But again, for the record, it was a mess and I do not co-sign this plot. Even though Bree sort of hates her kids because they are terrible, when Andrew runs over Mrs. Solis, she immediately jumps to protect him, and this plotline doesn't get resolved until the very last season. And a lot of people hate Catherine, but she's exactly the type of character that I love, right? If you watch Housewives, Heather Dubrow, they are of the same ilk, right? She's very mean, she's very cold, she's very hard, and like, that's my vibe. I love Catherine. If you thought Bree was cold, Catherine was icy. Where Bree sort of started to soften, we brought in a character who was so frigid and so controlled that she would never allow herself to like break ever. And it turned out that she was like on the run from an abusive husband and she was doing all of this stuff to like escape a guy who was evil and crazy. And at the end of the season, she did what she needed to do to protect her family. I liked Catherine because she brought in this element of someone so transformed by their trauma that they couldn't allow anyone else in, right? Catherine doesn't really become friends with the women until like basically the end of the season or even season 5, and then she once again starts terrorizing them after the time skip, and she unfortunately they didn't like know what to do with her, and I feel bad that they made her like a crazy lady. But again, she was so affected by her DV and her situation that she was like a completely different person. And while it wasn't handled the most sensitively, it was well done in the sense that like when certain things happen to you in life, you are no longer the same person that you were before. And that's something that if you follow my book reviews, I read a lot of books about trauma, and it's sometimes like a little bit hard to swallow and a little bit hard to accept because I think books right now are a little bit too obsessed with trauma, but like it is realistic and it is real. It is the human condition. Part 3, we're going to talk about the drama.